Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Shenanigans Dictionary podcast. Today, we are talking about the culture shock of moving to the UK. I have thought of doing this podcast episode for a while. I moved here from Ireland, and you would think that Ireland and the UK, basically a unit, they're really similar in a lot of ways, geographically, landscape wise. It's a literal 45-minute flight over. But in that small amount of distance and space, both these countries, the United Kingdom and Ireland, are so different in so many senses. And I wanted to talk about it. So, first of all, can we talk about miles per hour? Because when I came here, I was kind of confused as to why the British Empire has miles per hour as their unit because they use metric systems in most other things. I think the first time I encountered this was when we drove from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland, to Belfast. And the second that we crossed the border, our car automatically updated the sign system 2 miles per hour, which I found so interesting. I was like, they still use meters here. They use Celsius, which is a metric unit. So for me, when I came over here, it wasn't intuitive to see limits like 70 miles per hour because those aren't numbers that I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing 60, 30, or 120. And also, in terms of cars, when I came over, I found it quite strange to notice like license plates on cars because the front of the cars in the UK are like white in color, but they have this like mustard yellow color in the back. And the way that the license plates are, I do not understand. Like, I've had someone explain to me what each number, what the letters mean, but it's quite different because in Ireland we have it like, you have your county represented by the county that you're in. So for example, Kilkenny is KK, then the years, like 08, 10, so 2008, 2010, it's easier. It was different for me to see mustard yellow license plates at the back of cars. Something that I've also noticed is that a lot of taxis have this square notice. It's like a physical notice, like screwed or embedded into the back of the car. And it looks really odd at the back of the car. I think it's to, publicly announce that, hey, this car is used as a taxi. It's a vehicle meant for passengers. But it was just so interesting to me. And a fun little neuroscience fact, the reason why it feels so jarring when you are used to something, for example, kilometers per hour, and we've moved over and now it's miles per hour, it's something called spatial mapping interference. So my brain has built this grid of the world, which is based on the units that I've grown up with. I've grown up with 30 kilometers per hour, 60 kilometers, 120. And then when I see a 70 miles per hour like sign in the UK, my brain has to perform this translation from the kilometers to understand what that sign means. So it is literal brain lag, which can happen to anyone really when they've moved from even like the US to the UK. I have a lot of friends who are currently converting Fahrenheit to Celsius whenever they're talking to us in terms of temperature. And it's probably the same if we go over on that side of the world. So it is quite interesting how they all mean the same thing just by different names, but these values are different, which makes it kind of its own complex equation. So another fun thing that I observed was I went to the supermarket to get some milk. And when I picked up the bottle, it said 1 pint of milk. And in my head, I was like, I have never seen a supermarket say 1 pint of milk before. And I've seen liters in so many different countries as well. So when I saw the 1 pint, I just stood there for a second being like, what the hell is 1 pint? Like, is that a liter? And then I had to look and the liters were written towards the bottom of the bottle. But the first thing I saw was the pint. And I was like, wow, that's so interesting that milk is sold in pints in the UK. I was unaware about that. But, we love to go to the groceries here. We love to go to the shops. A lot of the people working in these establishments tend to be so sweet and so helpful. The way that they use love after every sentence. So it's like, oh, is that all love? How can I help you, love? Like, it's so endearing. It's so cute. Like in Ireland, we are quite friendly, but this kind of casual use of love at the end of sentences in the UK is really endearing and specific for here. We are talking about groceries and shopping. So I find British coins, aka pence, quite difficult as a physical entity to use, mainly because the value of the coins are written like in really, really tiny handwriting. And a lot of the coins don't have the actual number. So it's like you're reading the number 10 rather than seeing the number 10, if that makes sense. So I remember I first tried to use coins and it was just taking me too long to figure out. But, from being used to using, I'd say, euros and cents, where the cents, they're quite big coins as well, and very clear in their color coordination. So you'd have a golden border line outside, and then in silver, you'll see, €1, €2. You'll see, even in the 50 cent and 20-cent coins, you'll see the big 50 and the big 20. So it was a bit of a culture shock when I was using pence that I could just see, the Queen's face. And I was like, where's the number? Like, how much is this? And then you see like a little bit written, I'd say in the back, just like 10 pence, TENPENCE. And it's all kind of monochromatic. And they aren't like circular in shape. They're 7-sided coins, which make them quite interesting as a shape. But yeah, I feel like the color just being one color on the coin makes it a bit tough to look for what the value is if someone doesn't know. Now, I did want to mention and talk about the British transport system because it needs to be said. I genuinely was in shock when I found out the prices of taking a train here because I just wanted to go on a little day trip to London. It's, 2.5 hours from where I am. I remember opening my laptop, looking it up, and then seeing these absolutely absurd prices, almost like £100, £110. And I was like, guys, I'm literally just going 2.5 hours. Like, how is it this expensive? And I remember asking my flatmates, being like, am I being scammed? Am I on like the wrong website or something? And then they explained it to me that no, this is how British transport works. A lot of it has to do with the fact that it is privatized. So, different companies are going to try to capitalize as much as they can, I guess. I remember showing them the Irish transport system for comparison. And it's so interesting how, the same 2.5 hour journey, 3 hour journey, it's all a unified price in Ireland and it's much cheaper. I really don't think you're going to get ever a triple digit ticket price on a train in Ireland. That was really interesting to me to see from a British transport point of view, even the concept of having, peak hours and not peak hours. Because for me to get a train to London is actually more expensive than me flying from Manchester to Dublin and then flying from Dublin to London. That flight path is cheaper than the direct train. So yeah, I found it quite tricky to navigate that train system. And I haven't really taken many trains out to different parts. I'd say I'm lucky that like Sheffield is located close to, Birmingham, Manchester, and those ticket prices are quite reasonable. But I think because London is London, those ticket prices seem to be really hiked. I do like the price of buses though. Buses seem to be quite good. But again, they're not as fast as trains. So there is a slight preference. If some place is really, really far, you'd probably want to go there by train, but then you're going to end up spending so much money trying to get there. I guess it's a trade-off in a sense. But what's really interesting about that is neuroscientifically, this creates something called navigational anxiety. When the cost of travel is inconsistent, so in this case, a ticket system where the ticket prices are changing all the time based on their hours and the company that is selling them, your amygdala, which is this fear center of the brain or the emotional center of the brain, is in this state of conscious threat detection. It's low-level threat detection. It's constantly aware. So traveling in the UK can literally feel more exhausting than it really should because our brain is in this calculative state of being, okay, am I scammed right now? Is this the best ticket I can get? Whereas in Ireland, it wasn't like that because I knew the ticket prices are the same if I get it like, 8 a.m. in the morning or 5 p.m. in the evening. They're not going to change. And they're not going to change if it's a weekend or a weekday, things like that. So I really appreciate the Irish transport system and I'm happy that I got to experience that. So something that's really changed in my life as I moved to the UK are the accents around me. I really, really adore the British accent now. It's grown on me. So there's some slang that I learned about and I literally have a note on my phone because I was asking my friends about this and they're just words that I've never ever heard before. So for example, there's a word called Numpty, which is if you're being a bit silly. And then there's the phrase, how long is a piece of string, which is the British way of saying, I don't know, apparently. Again, guys, I actually don't understand this. And then there's another phrase, dog and bone, which I'm learning is Cockney rhyming slang. So picking up the dog and bone is like picking up the phone. So yeah, really interesting as English language. And it's quite funny to me that there are certain words that are said different in a British accent because they don't pronounce certain parts of the word. And I've brought this out to a friend of mine. And every time I bring it up, just like as a fun banter, teasing kind of way, he'll be like, we invented the language. We can say it however we want. And I'm like, okay. You do you. Yeah, it's great. It is fun to hear those accents. And, I've also caught on to some phrases that I'd never really used before. So, for example, see you in a bit is something that I've just never used until I moved to Sheffield. But it was really nice about the UK in general. I've heard that with other people as well, they've had similar experiences where people are quite accepting of your diverse background, your ethnicity. In the UK, because it's so ethnically diverse, me being from Ireland or anyone who's come from like an ethnically different background is just accepted as that identity. No one's asking, where are you really from? Or like, where are your parents from or whatever. Like, it's point blank. Okay, you're from this country, you're born there. It's really sweet and nice to be accepted and acknowledged as what you're telling them rather than what they want you to say and what they're assuming. And it's really nice to see the international food section in like grocery stores like Tesco, Sainsbury's. There's so much international food. There's no need to go to like a separate store, which is really lovely. And again, it kind of shows how accommodating the UK is in terms of its diversity, because I mean, I am from Ireland, but I think the concept of having people move over to Ireland is a relatively newer one than people moving to the UK, because people have been moving to the UK for longer than they've been moving to Ireland. So the population reflects that. So it is nice to see that bit of diversity in the UK. And also, a slightly controversial opinion, but the weather is nicer here. Like, I hate to admit it, but it is the same temperature as Ireland. Like, when you look at the actual values, it's around the same, 10 degrees, whatever it is, but it's not rainy and windy at the same time. So it's nice that both of those really difficult weather conditions are separate, because you only have to deal with one at a time. Whereas in Ireland, it tends to be quite rainy and quite windy at the same time, which makes it quite difficult to, walk anywhere or like use an umbrella and things like that. Something also that I've observed is that a lot of the days, like when I'm calling my parents, it's nice and sunny in the UK, but it's just been cloudy and rainy in Ireland. And I genuinely feel like Ireland just gets more clouds and rain, which again, it does overall have this impact on mood in a way. And another shock for me was university exams happening after Christmas, because back home, you finish your semester, you finish your exams, and you enjoy your break. You have a long, almost a month-long break. No one bothers you. But what I've seen in the UK is that it's just a revision period. You're meant to be studying and working on your deadlines and stuff. And I think it's a conscious effort that the student has to take to make sure that you have enough time off during the Christmas break and that you have enough time to rejuvenate before you go into the study exam period. Also, something really interesting is, and I'm sure it's true in Ireland as well, but I've seen it on a more prominent basis here, is the CCTV footage. So every street corner that I've noticed, like really random street corners, have a CCTV camera. Like, I understand having it in like a shopping center or, a public area, but like the bottom of a random street really confused me. I was like, why does this street need a CCTV? I mean, it's good for like, security and stuff, but it just came as a little bit of a culture shock to me. Also, talking about that, actually, knife crimes are a bit of a problem in the UK, because I went shopping with my mom when I first moved here. I wanted to get some cutlery, literal forks, spoons, and butter knives. And I ended up, going to the cashier, and the cashier asked me for my ID. And in my head, I was like, number one, they're butter knives. Number two, my mother is with me. Like, you can see that, but they still asked anyway. I remember trying to find a chopping knife, and my brother actually went through the same issue where when he moved to the UK, both of us are trying to find a chopping knife, and we genuinely couldn't find one. Like, so many places did not sell them. And when I finally got my hands on one in B&M, I was asked again for my ID, and I was like, damn, you guys really take this seriously. Something now that I've also observed is that in the grocery stores here, they don't have their alcohol section sectioned off, because in Ireland, you have your whole grocery store, and at the very end, the very back, there tends to be an alcohol section, but there's usually a gate you can open and close to enter. Whereas over here, the alcohol section is just like any other aisle. Like, it's not like a separated section, which I found quite interesting. But I've also observed that they're really strict with, selling alcohol to people. Like, they ask everyone for ID. And I don't think I've heard or seen people in Ireland being asked for ID as frequently as I have in the UK. Like, if someone looks slightly younger than 25, you will be asked. And if someone's with you and they don't have their ID, you will just not be able to buy alcohol in a way. I found that really interesting, something that I hadn't really seen or observed before. What's really interesting about this, just as we're ending today's episode, that when you move someplace, there are things that will stand out to you, that you will find a bit weird, a bit new. And the reason why is because of something called categorization bias. So our brains love familiarity. We get used to things really easily. We get set into a routine. And, I was so used to everything in Ireland, and once I've moved over to the UK, I start seeing, 1 pint of milk and yellow license plates, and that breaks the pattern that my brain's expecting, which triggers this tiny quote-unquote error signal in the anterior cingulate cortex. And obviously, eventually with time, your brain will start to rewire and all these new things will start feeling normal. Things like 1 pint, things like 70 miles per hour. It will become the norm as time progresses. But yeah, I just found it really cool how, despite being so close as countries, Ireland and England are so different. Outro point that I wanted to mention. The NHS is genuinely one of my favorite medical services. Everything is free, which is so cool. Like, I've not had to pay for a GP appointment. I've not had to pay for a blood test. One of my friends had to like go to this emergency thing to stitch his finger. Like, it's all free, and it's just so nice that they're so welcoming. For me personally, it's been quite a quick service. I'm also extremely delighted at the fact that therapy is free in the UK, which is genuinely something that I feel like a lot of countries need to adapt, because it's so nice knowing that mental health resources are free. And also, if you have any underlying conditions, whether it's thyroid, diabetes, things that you require constant medication for, a lot of these conditions have free medication available. So you literally get a prescription exemption certificate and you go to your pharmacy and just ask for your medication and they give it to you. And it feels kind of illegal because you're not paying anything, but it's so cool. And I really, really like the structure of the NHS. I appreciate that they do this, even for people who aren't citizens of the country. It's just whoever is living in the UK essentially. So yeah, shout out to free therapy in the UK. So thank you so much for listening, guys. I hope this was an informative, fun episode, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.